After the Ice Age began to ease, the world seemed to breathe again. Glaciers retreated, rivers ran freer, forests spread into lands once locked in frost, and people began to imagine stability. For the first time in tens of thousands of years, the earth seemed to be warming into a gentler age, one that promised abundance. Hunters followed herds into valleys newly rich with life, families lingered longer in fertile places, and the first hints of settlement began to stir. Yet just as this world seemed to open, it closed again. In the span of a single lifetime, the climate turned against them. Temperatures plunged, rivers froze, and forests withered beneath the sudden return of glacial cold. What should have been a new chapter for humanity collapsed into an old nightmare. For those who lived through it, the world itself seemed broken. An age of promise reversed into hardship. This violent return to cold, known today as the Younger Dryas, was more than a shift in climate. It was a rupture, sharp and unforgiving, that struck the Earth about 12,900 years ago. In less than 50 years, an instant in geological time, global temperatures in the northern hemisphere plummeted by over 10 degrees Celsius. It was not a gradual drift into winter, but a sudden and catastrophic fall, a reminder that the balance of nature could snap without warning. For the people alive then, the Younger Dryas was no abstract concept. It meant hunger when herds changed their paths, fear when crops withered in frosts, and desperation when familiar lands became unlivable. Yet what if its impact was even greater than survival alone? What if the Younger Dryas did not merely freeze rivers and forests, but also buried human history beneath its ice? In this mystery lies a haunting possibility that civilizations, fragile but rising, may have been swept away before they were ever remembered. The first clue to this lost chapter did not come from ruins or monuments, but from something as fragile as a flower. In 1916, Swedish geologist Lennart von Post studied layers of ancient sediment and found an unexpected surge of pollen from a small Arctic plant, Dryas octopetala. This bloom, with its white petals and resilience to cold, thrives only in harsh, frozen climates. Its sudden reappearance in layers that should have been warming revealed a secret. After the Ice Age had begun to ease, the Earth was thrust back into glacial conditions. That flower gave its name to the mystery, the Younger Dryas. From that moment, scientists realized the Earth's climate could swing wildly, flipping from warmth to cold in the blink of a century. For decades, explanations followed. Most believed the cause lay in water, not sky. They pictured vast floods of meltwater pouring into the Atlantic as the North American ice sheets collapsed. The oceans, delicate in their balance, may have faltered when that fresh water poured in, stalling the Gulf Stream and plunging Europe and much of the Northern Hemisphere back into cold. It was a vision that made sense. Ice melts, oceans shift, climates freeze. Simple, powerful, convincing. But as the 20th century turned, new evidence emerged that suggested something more violent, something from above. In 2007, physicist Richard Firestone and his colleagues revealed microscopic clues scattered across ancient soils. They found tiny spheres of carbon and glass fragments fused by heat so extreme that no ordinary fire could explain them. Not campfires, not even vast wildfires burning across forests could melt soil into glass. These were, they argued, the fingerprints of catastrophe. A cosmic object, perhaps a comet, breaking apart in the skies and igniting the earth below. If true, then fire rained from the heavens. Forests burned from horizon to horizon, smoke darkened the sky, and the world slipped into chaos. For those living on the ground, it would not have been a slow unraveling of seasons, but an apocalypse of fire and ice, a nightmare both cosmic and earthly. Even as the theory faced resistance, it would not fade. Because history, science, and myth all carry whispers that catastrophes from the sky have shaped the Earth before and will again. The Younger Dryas, sudden and mysterious, may have been one such moment, a time when human culture stood at the edge of something new, only to be pushed back into silence. Tonight we follow this mystery. From a fragile flower preserved in mud, to firestorms that may have scarred continents, to whispers of civilizations that might have been erased before memory began. Stay with us, and remember to like and subscribe, because the story of the Younger Dryas is not just about ice, it is about the possibility that history itself lies buried beneath it.
In 1998, a team of scientists ventured deep into the Greenland ice sheet, drilling into its frozen heart. What they pulled from the depths were not simple blocks of ice, but long cylinders of frozen history, cores of ice stretching back tens of thousands of years. At first glance, they looked unremarkable, plain columns of white stacked in laboratories. But inside them were secrets older than civilization itself. Each layer was a page of time, thin as paper, stacked one upon another, like the rings of an ancient tree. Inside those layers were bubbles, no larger than the head of a pin, fragile, invisible to the naked eye. Yet they held something extraordinary, the very breath of the past. Air trapped when snow first fell thousands of years ago, preserved perfectly in crystal. To study those bubbles was to inhale the atmosphere of another age, and within them lay evidence of catastrophe. When the scientists measured the gases inside, the story became clear. Around 12,900 years ago, the temperature of the northern hemisphere collapsed by more than 10 degrees Celsius in less than 50 years. It was abrupt, brutal, and unlike the slow shifts of ordinary climate. This was no gentle winter creeping in. It was a plunge into glacial conditions, a freefall that reshaped the lives of everyone who endured it. Imagine what that meant for the people on the ground. Hunters who once followed herds across open valleys found the animals gone, their migrations disrupted, their paths frozen under snow. Families who had begun to settle along rivers discovered those waters locked in ice. Forests that had just begun to spread northward shrank back, leaving only barren lands behind. The warmth that had promised abundance vanished, replaced with hunger, cold, and relentless uncertainty. The ice cores recorded this collapse in silence, layer upon layer, without judgment. But for those who lived through it, silence was impossible. Their world had turned against them, and every season carried its weight in suffering. Even before these frozen records were drawn from the earth, one man had already been thinking about what could cause such sudden change. In 1989, geochemist Wallace Broecker offered a bold idea. He imagined the Great Laurentide ice sheet, a continent of ice that had once smothered much of North America, collapsing into floods. Torrents of fresh water poured into the Atlantic, overwhelming the delicate balance of ocean circulation. The Gulf Stream, the mighty conveyor that carried warmth northward, depends on cold, salty water sinking in the Arctic seas. But if too much fresh water enters, the system falters. Salinity drops, the water grows lighter, and the engine of the ocean stalls. Without the Gulf Stream, Europe would freeze, and the northern hemisphere would be thrust back into ice. It was a vision both simple and terrifying. Ice melts, floods surge, oceans stall, climates collapse. For years, Broecker's theory stood as the most convincing explanation, a reminder that the Earth's systems are fragile, vulnerable to imbalance. But the Earth holds more than one story. Beneath the layers of soil and stone, other clues waited, pointing not only to water, but to fire, not only to oceans, but to the sky. In 2007, another voice entered the debate, one that would ignite controversy across the scientific world. Physicist Richard Firestone and his colleagues proposed that the Younger Dryas was not the work of melting ice or sluggish oceans, but something far more dramatic, something that came from the sky. According to their research, scattered across North America were strange clues: microscopic diamonds, spherules of molten rock, layers of soot, and a mysterious black mat of carbon-rich earth. To Firestone, these were not the marks of floods or glaciers. They were the fingerprints of an impact. He suggested that around 12,900 years ago, a massive comet, or perhaps fragments of one, exploded over the Earth. The blast rained fire across continents, igniting forests, sending shockwaves through the atmosphere, and covering the ground with glassy beads of melted stone. The fires filled the skies with soot, darkening the sun, choking the air. Crops would not have grown, animals would have fled or died, and the sudden plunge into cold may have been triggered not only by disrupted oceans, but also by dust and ash swirling in the stratosphere. If true, this impact would not just explain the Younger Dryas, but it could also account for the sudden disappearance of the great beasts of the Ice Age. Mammoths, mastodons, giant sloths, saber-toothed cats, creatures that had thrived for millennia, vanished in the blink of an eye. To Firestone and his supporters, the comet's fire had not only scarred the land, but had burned entire ecosystems out of existence. But perhaps most haunting of all was what it might have done to people.
Archaeological sites tell us that the Clovis culture, once dominant across North America, declined sharply around this time. Their stone points, once spread across the continent, dwindled. Whole ways of life disappeared. To some, it seemed as though the comet had not just ended an age of animals, but had erased an age of humans as well. The idea was explosive, almost too cinematic to believe. Scientists debated fiercely, some dismissing the evidence as coincidence, others pointing to flaws in the data. The impact hypothesis became one of the most controversial theories in climate science, rejected by many, but never fully silenced. And yet, for those who dreamed of lost civilizations, cultures older than Sumer, older than Egypt, the Firestone theory offered something tantalizing. If an impact had indeed struck 12,900 years ago, might it not have destroyed more than animals and hunters? Might it have buried entire chapters of human history beneath the ash and ice? The Earth, after all, does not keep perfect records. Floods wash away, fires consume, glaciers grind history to dust. What if the comet did not only erase mammoths, but memories? What if it wiped away civilizations that we no longer remember? Societies that thrived before the cold and the fire returned? This is the question that lingers at the edge of science and myth. Because in scattered ruins, in flood legends, and in the stones of places like Göbekli Tepe, whispers of something older remain. If the Younger Dryas was a catastrophe, then the greatest mystery is not how it happened, but what it destroyed. Most mainstream archaeology paints a picture of humanity at that time as small bands of hunter-gatherers, nomadic tribes chasing game, surviving by fire and stone. But what if that is only part of the story? What if something greater once existed, now hidden beneath the silence of 13,000 years? For centuries, myths and legends have spoken of lost worlds. From Plato's tale of Atlantis, drowned in a single night of fire and flood, to flood stories found in almost every ancient culture, from Mesopotamia to the Americas. Are these just stories or fractured memories of real events passed down through generations? Consider Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey. Buried under thousands of years of soil, its massive stone circles were discovered only in the 1990s. The site dates to around 11,600 years ago, astonishingly right at the end of the Younger Dryas. It was built by people we are told had no cities, no agriculture, no writing. And yet they carved megaliths weighing tons, aligned them with the stars, and raised them in sacred patterns. Why would the world's first monumental temple appear so suddenly after a cataclysm? Was it the work of survivors, remnants of a culture that had been forced to begin again? Some researchers believe the timing is no coincidence. The end of the Younger Dryas marks not just the return of warmth, but perhaps the rebirth of civilization. If something older had been lost in the chaos, Göbekli Tepe may have been a kind of memory, a monument built to preserve knowledge that survived the fire and the ice. And then there are the ruins hidden beneath the sea. Off the coast of India, in the Gulf of Kambat, sonar scans revealed structures under the waves, roads, walls, and geometric patterns, possibly dating back to the very edge of the Ice Age. At that time, sea levels were more than 300 feet lower than today. Entire coastlines where humans surely lived are now drowned. If people had built settlements, even cities, along those ancient shores, then rising seas would have swallowed them, erasing all but fragments. Imagine how much of human history lies beneath the oceans, waiting to be rediscovered. The Younger Dryas, whether by comet, flood, or shifting oceans, would have been the perfect storm of destruction. Forests burned, rivers raged, glaciers advanced, and seas rose. If an advanced society had existed, one with seafaring, with architecture, with knowledge of the stars, it would have been shattered, scattered into myth. Survivors would have carried fragments of memory, retold as legend, reshaped into story. Atlantis, Mu, Lemuria, names we now dismiss as fantasy, may in fact be echoes of real places, filtered through time. Even the biblical flood, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and Native American tales of a world burned and frozen all speak of the same era, not coincidence, perhaps, but memory. Mainstream science urges caution. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence, and yet evidence has a way of hiding. The glaciers of the Ice Age scraped the land clean. Rising seas swallowed coastlines whole. Fires reduce history to ash. What survives are whispers, in stone circles, in submerged ruins, and in stories passed down like fading embers of an older fire. The question remains, did the Younger Dryas end not just an ice age, but a chapter of human civilization we have forgotten?
The Younger Dryas is more than a puzzle of ice and climate. It is a reminder that history is fragile, that civilization is not a straight line, but a flame, bright, brilliant, and vulnerable to the winds of nature. If it was triggered by melting ice, then it shows us how delicate the balance of oceans and climate truly is. If it was born from fire in the sky, then it reminds us that our planet is never beyond the reach of cosmic chance. And if it destroyed more than animals and hunters, if it erased civilizations older than memory, then it reveals that our story may be far deeper, far stranger than we ever imagined. Every culture carries a memory of catastrophe, floods that swallowed the earth, fire that rained from the heavens, darkness that lingered for years. Perhaps these are not simply myths, but fragments of truth, survivors' tales from an age of upheaval. Göbekli Tepe rising from the dust, submerged ruins sleeping beneath the waves, ancient legends of a golden age lost to disaster, they all whisper the same possibility that humanity has risen before, only to fall, leaving little behind but stone and story. The Younger Dryas forces us to ask not only what happened, but what was lost. Were we truly just scattered tribes of hunters, or the descendants of something greater, survivors carrying shards of memory through an age of fire and ice? Until more evidence emerges, the answer remains hidden. But perhaps that is the true power of the Younger Dryas mystery. It opens a door to wonder.
It challenges us to see beyond what is written, to imagine the civilizations that may have lived, thrived, and perished long before the first known cities rose. And in that uncertainty lies a haunting thought. If it happened once, it could happen again. Civilizations are not immortal. Even ours, with all its power, could vanish in a single stroke of nature or sky, leaving only ruins and stories behind. The ice remembers. The earth remembers. The question is, will we?